Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. If you just missed our first and 15 there at DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app, I've vented a little bit. Obviously, pretty disappointed about the Braves game last night. Very anxious about Game 4 coming up this evening. But for the next hour or so, we're going to keep it mostly to football here, so you don't have to worry about that. We'll give you a little bit of break from some of the baseball talk if that's been frustrating for you over the course of the last day. Many of you Braves fans, not all of you are, but nonetheless, we're going to do our job here over the course of the next little bit. That means special guest in the show. I'm going to tell you more about that here coming up in just about a second. Terrence Edwards also stops by today there as well. Terrence has been kind of in the news a little bit last week or so. That's kind of fun. We'll get to that. Pretty interesting discussion about Brock Bowers that I think we get a chance to have today. That is obviously a very good thing to do. And a very interesting and also, I think, fun look at the Georgia locker room on Saturday night. And interesting to see a fired-up Kirby Smart after a big win, but also the words that Smart using right now, very, very different than what some of the folks are using about Georgia here right now. And that could tell you something about perhaps where Georgia is heading here the rest of the way. So we're going to start with that. Going to be a fun conversation. We're glad to have you with us for it. Special guest too, which I'll tell you more about here coming up as soon as we kind of kick off the big show. So let's go ahead and do it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I want to begin today with a fun announcement coming up in just a few minutes, probably about a half an hour or so from right now. We're going to get a chance to talk to the great former Georgia coach, Mark Richt, obviously one of our favorites. It's always a pleasure and a privilege anytime we get to have Mark Richt on our show. Today, going to be a lot of fun to have Coach Richt on because Coach Richt is also a part of a very, very big and important event next week, raising money for a couple of great causes. DawgNation is so proud to be able to partner with Coach Richt on that. I personally am very proud to be a part of this. We've been telling you a lot about Richt's Dog Bowl coming up next week. Really fun bowling-themed event that some special donors get a chance to be a part of to help raise money for a couple of terrific causes. A lot of the Georgia football players going to be a part of this there too. So Coach Richt's going to tell us more about this here in a moment, including how you can help participate and help them meet a goal, ambitious goal as it is, to raise a whole lot of money for a couple of very important medical research-oriented causes. We'll get to that here coming up in just a moment. Always a thrill and a great, great pleasure to have Mark Richt on the show. We'll do that here in a little bit. We'll also have Terrence Edwards on the show as per usual. That's coming up in just a little bit there as well. Prior to that, one of the things we like to do on our show is obviously, I've been a Georgia fan my entire life. I would think that I'm deeply entrenched into DawgNation. Many of you are also kind of deeply entrenched into DawgNation. We're very familiar with the conversation that we have, as we like to say sometimes, inside the bubble of DawgNation as it relates to this team. We just kind of know we have an ongoing conversation about the good, the bad, and everything in between when it comes to Georgia football. Sometimes we also like to kind of pull back from 10,000 feet and kind of give you the national perspective. Here are the people that don't follow Georgia quite as closely. They don't have the emotional tie to Georgia that we perhaps all have. Here's what they're saying about Georgia. And sometimes giving you a little bit of a survey of that kind of thing, I think, has some value. We did that yesterday with the very funny about face that a guy like Joel Klatt from Fox has done. Last week, very critical of Georgia. This week, all of a sudden, liking Georgia again. Georgia's still Georgia. And sometimes just getting that national perspective is sort of interesting. Now, as we do that kind of thing, here's what so-and-so said. Here's what so-and-so said. Here's kind of is it repository? Is that the word? Here's kind of a repository of all the opinions that are out there about Georgia. You see most of this right now kind of falling into probably one of two categories here in the moment. There is a lot of talk about two different Georgia players. A lot of talk about Brock Bowers, and of course there should be. We're going to talk more about Bowers ourselves here coming up in a moment, both in terms of what the nation's saying about him right now and what Georgia fans themselves are also saying about Bowers. We're going to get to that here coming up in just a little bit. Of course, there's a lot of talk about Brock Bowers. We believe that Bowers is legitimately very real, a Heisman Trophy contender. And the other name right now, and we would say also justifiably so, that's getting a lot of talk around Georgia right now is Carson Beck. to our eyes, I'm going to ask Mark Richt this question a little bit later on when he joins us, but to our eyes, it just seems like Carson Beck is really growing up. And you don't have to be a former quarterback like Jake Fromm, who talked about him on the show yesterday. You don't have to have that level of expertise to notice this. It just seems like Beck is getting more and more comfortable. It's happening at a rapid rate, and it seems like he's not just having incremental growth. If anything, from where he started first quarter game 1 to where he was for the full game 6, it almost seems like Beck may be going through something that almost feels like exponential growth, where he's getting compoundingly better week after week after week, and the best was obviously on display this past Saturday, and the very best may be yet to come. So most of the conversation around Georgia thus far has sort of centered around what's happening at quarterback. Carson Beck seems to be having a very good year, answering any concerns that some may have had about a new quarterback for Georgia as it seeks another national championship, and obviously Brock Bowers, the somewhat unorthodox yet nonetheless fully legitimate Heisman Trophy candidate at the tight end position. But it's interesting to note that when Kirby Smart had a chance to speak to his own team in the locker room after last week's celebration against Kentucky, that's not the kind of stuff that was on his mind. We would say, hey, Georgia has been propelled as of late by its passing attack. Throwing the ball in the second half against Auburn, staving off what could have been a loss on the road. Coming out and hanging 51 points against Kentucky there on Saturday. Seemed like passing game, passing attack propelled a lot of that. Now, we know, fairly or not, sometimes you sort of associate the passing attack with a little bit more of a finesse-oriented style. This is more about your athleticism and your quickness and your intelligence, how much you can out-scheme your opponent. There is also another side of football that's sort of the brute physicality. And while a lot of folks kind of outside Georgia are looking at the brute physicality around this team right now, or I should say looking at the passing game, the Carson Beck, the Brock Bowers type stuff, after the game against Kentucky on Saturday, it was the brute physicality that Kirby Smart himself wanted to celebrate, because he knows that's what Kentucky brings to the table. And going back to the whole Bloody Tuesday thing that Georgia made a very big deal about last week leading into the game against Kentucky, that being more physical than the Wildcats was Kirby's sort of name of the game and the number one key to victory. And that is what Smart celebrated in the locker room after the game's over. If you're a Georgia fan, this will fire you up. We always love to hear these kind of off-the-cuff, sort of unplanned moments from Kirby Smart. This was the way that he celebrated with his team after the game on Saturday night. It is telling that Kirby's talking about Georgia right now in a little bit of a different way than the national media is. This is what Kirby said in the locker room.
Wrecking ball, wrecking ball. And them offensive line was the biggest wrecking ball I've ever seen. One of the most physical, best performances against a really good quality team, okay? We played our brand of football, and y'all came out and did it. I respect the leadership of this team. We still ain't where we want to go, but we're starting to see some indications.
I really like that from Kirby Smart. He says, we played our brand of football. Now, it would seem thus far to most of us that while we certainly understand what the brand of Georgia football has been, last 2 national championship seasons, great defense, the hallmark of that. The 2021 team, perhaps the greatest defense of all time. Kirby Smart, since he's been here as UGA coach, great offensive lines almost each and every year, opening big holes for running backs. Obviously, Georgia has prided itself on being a running back university, both long-term throughout history and even right now in the present day with the backs that Del McGee has brought into this program. That's kind of been a big part of this program's DNA. And what Kirby Smart says, even though people are fixated on Carson Beck and the things that he's doing well, justifiably so, and fixated on Brock Bowers and the weapon he is in the passing game, almost unlike anything Georgia's perhaps had in anything close to kind of, certainly almost the 21st century, and justifiably so, getting that level of attention. Kirby Smart says, when I look at this game, 13 points allowed, the fact that Kendall Milton's out there averaging 5.9 yards per carry and a healthy return, the fact that Dejon Edwards is continuing what quietly has been a pretty good season for him, averaging 6 yards per carry, that, Kirby Smart says there in that locker room speech, sort of looks like Georgia being Georgia there again. And I would say if you're a Georgia fan, that's kind of a fascinating thing to consider here for a moment, because right now there were a lot of people who did have somewhat meager expectations for the passing game. We've joked about this before, but there were a lot of people at one point in time who thought Georgia couldn't win a national championship with Stetson Bennett, and then they kind of changed their tune to say, well, now Georgia can't win one without Stetson Bennett. They just did a complete and total about-face because that's the argument that fit them in that particular moment. And so because of that, there was some skepticism kind of attached to Carson Beck as he begins the season. But Beck, for the most part, has answered those critics. We talked earlier about Beck being fueled by what he views as a little bit of a level of disrespect, and he's pretty clearly providing a very strong retort to that disrespect. And Brock Bowers gives Georgia the kind of individual weapon on offense that I don't know that it's had. Certainly in these last two, national championship seasons, Bowers has stood head and shoulders above anybody else. And maybe for anybody in the Kirby Smart era, or for maybe anybody almost any era of that prior to Georgia, at least in kind of the modern time, I don't know that Georgia's quite had an offensive weapon like it has with Brock Bowers. I'd suggest that it hasn't. But Kirby Smart's also telling you, down the stretch, it's going to be more than that. The kind of defense you've gotten used to seeing Georgia play, it sounds like Kirby believes they could be on their way to playing more like that on a regular basis. And adding the running game with a pair of healthy running backs, Milton and Edwards, to go along with that, sounds like Kirby Smart kind of sees that coming to fruition there as well. Because what you heard at the end of that clip was not just a sign of things for Georgia fans to be excited about, but perhaps a warning to anybody else that Georgia's going to play the rest of the way. That Georgia, Smart says, still has a long way to go. But they're starting to figure some things out. I think we all saw that with our own eyes there on Saturday. And the weeks to come, and what we talked about yesterday being kind of a tougher schedule than you might realize, with Florida and Missouri and Tennessee and Ole Miss all on the schedule in future weeks, the improved version of Georgia may be coming about at exactly the right time. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We are happy to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video. We start 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, DawgNation app. Total confession, I used our 1st and 15 today as a little bit of a gripe session, a little bit of a venting session. I was very, very frustrated by the Atlanta Braves loss last night to the Philadelphia Phillies, Game 3 of the NLDS. We're not going to spend time on this show doing that because we get paid to talk college football around here. But I did take a little bit of time to kind of clear the mechanism before the show started and kind of just vomit out some hot takes and some whatever about the Braves and Phillies. So now we're all fresh and ready and renewed. We're ready to talk Georgia football here, but obviously our minds are also on Game 4 for Atlanta up there in Philly later on this evening. Now, we're on the radio every day at Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcasts all across those platforms. Just really happy to have you with us as a part of the show. And a big thanks to our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for bringing it to you there as well. Now, there were a couple of new things I want to tell you about as it relates to Merriweather and Tharp. One of these I'm going to kind of hint and tease at. In the coming weeks, you're going to hear about some brand new offices opening up for Merriweather and Tharp. Obviously, a lot of us here in the Atlanta area have kind of known Merriweather and Tharp for a long time, but now extending beyond the Atlanta area, some brand new offices giving you a chance to do that. That's why we're going to give you a new website as it relates to Merriweather and Tharp. We're going to call you GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Call your attention to GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That's the website I want you to remember when you think about Merriweather and Tharp. A little bit different one than we've given you before, but it's the one to remember, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Now, when you hear me talk about the divorce process, here is something specifically I want you to think about in terms of a brand new service offering from our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. And I choose the word service intentionally here because one of the things that Merriweather and Tharp exists to do is to serve you in a time of need. And they've got a brand new way for you to consider the divorce process that you might be going through that I think is going to serve you in a time in which you're facing some incredible challenges, and I think it's going to lead you to the most satisfactory outcome possible. Here's the deal. If you've been through divorce, you got to understand this, that most divorces in some form or fashion are contested. You understand that. In some form or fashion, most divorces are contested. But Merriweather and Tharp has long believed that the less tense you can make that testing of the divorce, the better things are, especially for your children. And so Merriweather and Tharp has sort of always existed for that purpose. You've heard me kind of talk about that before there as well, is that they're going to walk with you through this, and they're going to try to make it a satisfactory outcome that the less contested, the better, or at least the less tense the contesting, the better. Let's say it that way. That's the way that goes. But here's the other thing. In addition to that, one of the things that folks probably run into when it comes to a contested divorce, something like that, is the fact that there are some financial concerns in terms of how do you pay for this? How do you, how do you account for what this is going to cost? Well, that's what a brand new offering from Merriweather and Tharp exists to solve for you. They call it Model M&T. This is a brand new way to kind of consider divorce, to kind of go through divorce, that's going to, I think, lead you to a more satisfactory outcome, but also greater certainty of what the financial situation is as you kind of walk through that. Model M&T is what it's called. There's a way to pay for this via flat rate. There's also a monthly subscription there as well. There's some additional details that you need to be aware of. So I want you to go online and read more about this. GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That's why Meriwether and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. Smart people thinking about creative ways to kind of make the divorce process a little easier to manage. Meriwether and Tharp is all about that. And the brand new Model M&T level of service is something I think you're going to really, really like. So I want you to check that out online, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. A very creative way to think about how you pay for this, how you have certainty about what it's going to cost you, but also how you lead yourself to a satisfactory outcome that kind of makes it as easy and manageable as possible on the people most impacted by this, which are probably your children. So online, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com for more information about that. All right, we got two great guests coming up. It's Coach Richt coming up here in a little bit. Big event taking place with him. It's Terrence Edwards coming up there as well. Prior to that, though, let us go around the doghouse, presented today by our friends at ServPro. And we told you before, hey, when we can do like survey of national media, they're saying something interesting about Georgia, obviously we want to be able to do that. And lately, a lot of that chatter is centered around Brock Bowers. And Randy Cross, of course, who's lived in Georgia for a long time, analyst for CBS Sports, a guy that you saw inside the NFL for a long time there as well, former San Francisco 49er. In talking about Georgia and their win against Kentucky, he phrased a statement about Brock Bowers that I think is very close to the way we've been kind of phrasing around here too. Obviously, tight end, unorthodox, win a Heisman Trophy. That's a little bit of a kind of a wild idea, perhaps in the past. This would be something you couldn't really imagine taking place in college football. But this isn't just hype. This isn't just sort of empty conjecture for somebody like with a loud mouth that speaks into a microphone. This really could be happening, and Bowers really could be the kind of special level of player who makes all this possible. And to give you just an idea of kind of what the national media conversation is, you sort of get the impression that people outside the bubble of DawgNation are starting to realize just how true and legitimate the Bowers Heisman candidacy is. Because listen to what Cross says about this, and then also what the other folks on the set do to affirm what Randy is saying. Take a listen to this.
Saturday night in Athens, Georgia, there was a meeting between two undefeated teams. Well, as it turned out, it was kind of like one undefeated team and one team that thought they were undefeated. Georgia, soup to nuts, was unbelievable. They were good on offense, they were good on defense, they're good on special teams. Carson Beck had his best game. He was accurate, his timing, it was crazy. And Brock Bowers, I know they talked about it on the broadcast. If it's ever going to be possible, at least since Leon Hart of Notre Dame in 49, a tight end, you could rationally make an argument this guy should be in the Heisman talk.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely.
So he says, hey, you can rationally, logically believe that Brock Bowers can be in the Heisman conversation. Other voices there on that CBS said, oh, yeah, no doubt. Amen. Amen. Preach it, brother. Like, you get a lot of that right now. People are starting to come to that realization. By the way, if you're watching on video, how great is it to see those handmade Brocktober signs there in Sanford Stadium right now? We love the way that Brocktober's taken off. We're having so much fun with that here at DawgNation Daily. We appreciate so many of you being a part and supporting that, just to kind of have fun. We believe by the end of this month, the Bowers Heisman candidacy is going to be a real thing. The Florida game, perhaps, final game of this month. Big showcase on a national weekend when there aren't tons of other very big games. Big chance for Bowers to prove what he's all about. And it's just the kind of career that he's putting together. And I got an interesting email. I want to read this to you on the screen here for a moment. I think it's okay probably to share this. Adam Tilley writes in from Greensboro, North Carolina about this. He says, I'd love to hear more about your thought about how Brock Bowers stacks up with, like, say, Herschel Walker. In my 30 years as a fan, I don't remember any one player that has played such a central role in the team's success. I think if he wins the Heisman, we're talking about a Jersey retired Circle of Honor type of thing for sure. But assuming some sort of quarterback like Michael Penix or Caleb Williams or Quinn Ewers or even like a J.J. McCarthy from Michigan, he says gasp, sneaks in and wins it, I don't believe it should detract from the status that he may deserve in the pantheon of true Georgia greats like Walker, Trippy, Sinkwich, etc. I think Adam's right on board on this. And that if you want to go back to the wintertime when we were kind of doing some fun, I had a vacation week, so we were doing sort of our Mount Rushmore of Georgia football. And at the time, we put Brock Bowers on our Mount Rushmore then. His third season, what we believe will be his final season at Georgia, is kind of only validating that point, that Bowers is in a category that the likes of a Herschel Walker, a Charlie Trippy, a Frank Sinkwich, probably David Pollack, there is only a small number of players that have kind of achieved the status that Bowers has achieved. And the number of guys that are truly better than him, I believe right now it's probably only Herschel Walker. I still believe that Herschel's the greatest player in college football history, so therefore he would get my top spot. But I believe right now Bowers is strongly on his way to perhaps being the second greatest player in his program's history. And this was easily obscured in 21 and 22 because there were so many other great players playing here at Georgia. Not to say this team's not deep and talented, but now it's 3 years worth of Brock Bowers. And you're seeing a statistical profile unlike almost anything you're used to seeing from tight ends. And more importantly than that, almost unlike anything you're used to seeing from Georgia pass catchers overall. That as kind of crazy and outlandish as some of the Herschel Walker rushing stats would have seemed back in the early 80s, some of these Brock Bowers stats are kind of in that same category here right now when you compare Bowers to what has typically been a very much an ensemble cast for Georgia on offense. You know, the path is always in the math, and the numbers tell the story. And the numbers on Brock Bowers are telling an amazing story right now. This is a historic figure, and historic figures ought to be honored with national awards. When this year's done, Bowers, if he continues at this pace, could very easily win the Heisman Trophy. And that is Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at ServPro. Now, things going well with Georgia after a big win against Kentucky on Saturday, but at your home, things may not be going very well. You may have had fire damage, water intrusion, some sort of something that's created an incredible mess that needs to be cleaned up. Now, this is one of those things, when I see a daunting task like this, I have no way to begin, no knowledge about where to start. But the restoration specialists of ServPro, they are all about that. They can clean up your mess, get it all put back together for you like it never even happened. Each franchise also independently owned and operated. That means people dedicate their livelihood to solving your problems when it comes to a water cleanup, a fire damage. Restoration specialists doing great work for you. So please find them online. It's servpro.com. That's SERV, servpro.com. All right, we're going to roll through here with back-to-back guests coming up. We're going to get Coach Rick coming up in just a few minutes. We'll talk some football with Coach, but we'll also get into a terrific event he's got coming up in just a few days. And for now, a guy whose name's been in the news here a little bit over the course of the last week because of the comparison that Brock Bowers is drawing to him. Fun to have Terrence Edwards on the show to talk all about that here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp here today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Terrence Edwards is no stranger hearing his name mentioned on TV. He did that millions of times over the course of a professional football career and obviously a high-profile career there at Georgia. But there's still something nice to know that your name pops up. And on that broadcast on Saturday, you heard a lot of mentions of Terrence Edwards because as Brock Bowers continues to rack up big stat, one run after the other. When you look in the annals of Georgia football history of the guy that's done this previously, oftentimes the only name there is Terrence Edwards. So, Terrence, I know you had some fun with this, and I know gives you a little bit more of a cachet with your sons here right now and your kids. So what's it like to sort of hear your name kind of mentioned so much lately as Brock Bowers starts to rack up things that you yourself did in your Georgia career?
Yes, it's funny, watching the game, then your name just all of a sudden just comes up in the lights of, Brock is trying to chase down your records. And for the record, I do believe he will get the touchdown mark this year. I've been hoping and praying that he tied the record and not break the record. So I'm going record that I would love. We can own the record, but he's a tremendous, tremendous football player. And if he's so lucky to break all of my records, that's not a bad thing being behind Brock Bowers.
So along those lines, you probably heard the phrase before, the idea that the NFL stands for not for long, and we're kind of used to that in football, the idea that, hey, success sometimes in football is short-lived because of the fact that this is a very, very tough sport. It's just hard to maintain success over a long period of time. But when you were at Georgia, your career did have a sense of longevity. You did have productive years, one right after the other. And that's what Bowers is kind of doing here too. Now, his career may only be 3 years at Georgia, but nonetheless, he's kind of showing the ability to have what we would think of as longevity at the college level. Terrence, what kind of mindset does it take to say, I'm not just going to have a great season or a handful of great games? Because for some guys, that can be enough. There are a small handful of guys who perhaps their moments at Georgia were only small in number, but they were, they came at the right time. A.D. Mitchell's probably an example of this. Not a long Georgia career, but certainly a significant one in a couple of very big moments. Yours is more about success over the course of the long haul. Brock Bowers kind of doing that here right now there as well. What does it take to have the right mindset to embrace the idea of longevity and to say, I'm going to do this well over the course of a period of years?
For me, it was just having a goal. I wanted to be the best. I didn't come into Georgia thinking I was just going to be some guy. Actually, trying to follow into my brother's footsteps. And I've always just tried to one-up him because he's my hero. He's a person that I look up to, and still to this day, he's a person that I'm trying to chase just to be a better person than him. And we all know what type of person my brother is.
Sure.
So for me, that was the goal of I got to continue to be great, to live up to the Edwards name for one, and live up to my brother's expectations of me. So that was the thing that pushed me to be the player that I was. And I'm just so competitive that I didn't want to go out there and just be, one hit wonder. I had goals. I want to win the Heisman like everybody. I want to win the Blitzer. So each year I wanted to continue to be the better version of myself. So that's what drove me to being the player that I was and being consistent throughout my whole 4 years at Georgia.
We talked before you joined us, but the fact that a lot of the conversation after the game against Kentucky is centered around what Carson Beck is doing, and I want to talk to you about that here in a moment, what Brock Bowers is doing. We just talked about that. But Kirby Smart seemed very interested in the idea of throwing a punch and taking a punch, being able to absorb the big hits, and the idea of the wrecking ball mentality. We heard Smart mentioning that in the locker room. We played that clip a moment ago. How important is it, Terrence, in your mind, for Georgia to add that kind of brute physicality that the program has been famous for to what right now is a very successful passing attack, kind of go back to the sort of complementary version of Georgia that has made Georgia the last couple of years? How important is that so-called like wrecking ball mentality for Georgia the rest of the way?
You got to have it, because as I've said throughout this season that this is not the same team from yesterday. So we got to continue to put emphasis on like what is your legacy going to be for the 2023 season, and we're doing it a different way. But you still got to go out there and just say punch people in the mouth, even in the passing game, in the running game, defensively, special teams. You got to go out there and set your own mark. We cannot live on yesterday. We can't do that. I think a lot of Georgia fans have got into that we are Georgia Bulldogs. We're the back-to-back champs, and each year brings a different team. Yes, we are talented, but talent doesn't always win. So this team has to make their own mark, and just hitting people in the mouth, even if it's pass protection or blocking down the field on the screens that Bobo throw. You have to go out and be the most physical team on the field that day. And normally the team that's the most physical normally wins.
Obviously, there are a lot of good vibes with the Georgia offense right now after you score 50 points the way that Georgia did, 51 to be exact, against Kentucky. Starting with Carson Beck here, how impressed are you with the growth that Beck seems to have shown over the course of this season?
I think it's the steady pace that for someone who hasn't started a football game in 4 years, and at that position, he hasn't been in the fire. So I think everyone was just worried about his performances or lack thereof in the first few games of the season. We didn't give him time to grow. Yes, he understands the offense. Yes, he's been in college for a significant amount of time, but he hasn't played in a real game. And I tell you this, the South Carolina game, he did well, especially in the second half. The Kentucky game, he did well. The Auburn game, it is hard to win SEC games, and I don't care what opponent it is. We have to give a little grace to understand that his growth as a player is going to help by each game that he plays. And you saw what he did against Kentucky. And now it's not going to be that every week. He may not start 11 for 11 every week, but as long as he's cool, calm, and collected, he's leading his offense, he's there with his balls, he's understanding his read, he's going to play that well more than not. So I just think we didn't allow him to have any grace at the beginning of the season, let alone that we didn't understand that the young man hasn't started a football game in 4 years.
Let me squeeze in one more real quick here because we're going to talk to Coach Richt in just a moment. But the Shaq meme online where he says, "I'm sorry, I wasn't familiar with your game." I have to admit, there's a certain version of that for me with Ra Thomas. I obviously knew the stats. I knew he led Mississippi State in receiving a year ago. But, Terrence, I like what this guy brings to the table for Georgia. Good size, seems to have some physicality in terms of how he plays the position. Clearly, he can go high point the football. He did that for his touchdown on Saturday. Other day, Jake Fromm kind of compared him to Lawrence Cager a little bit. I don't hate that comparison at all. Terrence, I know you love the position, but I really like what Ra is bringing to the table right now.
Yes, I think that's a good comparison for us, the impact that both have had as being transferred. They're different games. They're totally two different games, but the impact that both is having as transfers is there. And, I watch all receivers, and having Justin Robinson at Mississippi State and understanding the type of offense that they had with Mike Leach is totally different than a pro-style offense. In that offense in Mississippi State, that air raid is just going to a spot, getting open. Wasn't really a lot of route running and understanding coverages or understanding concepts. It's you go to this spot and you get open. You just sit down, and it's a lot different. So I think his early on struggles is because he had to learn a different form of offense, let alone his off the field issues that he had. But the talent is always there. The talent is undeniable. Every time he's got an opportunity, he's made a play. Now you can see that the confidence in himself, the confidence that the coaching staff have instilled in him, and the confidence that Carson have in him, that was a RPO who's like, if my guy got one-on-one over here, I'm giving him a chance. And the way he high-pointed that football and the way he got his foot down, those things are learned. Like, you have to practice. So I practice those things in my training sessions all the time because high-pointing the football is a skill. You just can't go out there to be able to have your body under control, to put your hands above your head and your eyes, then the awareness to know where you at on the field to get your foot down. That just doesn't happen overnight, and you just can't go out there and do that. So I just love what he's brought to the table, and hopefully he's there more than this year because he is a tremendous player. I mean, I think the transfers have done what I expected them to do, and that's why I tweeted.
Yeah.
We are losing. We are. Don't be worried when we lose a high school receiver because there's always someone
Good point.
that's college ready to come in and play from that transfer portal.
Terrence, great stuff as always. I'm going to encourage folks to find you there at the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy for some of that personal coaching like you were describing there. We really appreciate your time, and we always appreciate your insight, and we'll look forward to doing it with you again next week there as well.
But yeah, we're not going to announce that the Georgia-Florida.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, Terrence. I am sorry. Listen, I am sorry about that. You did get some great, in addition to getting mentioned on the broadcast, also going to the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame there as well, Terrence. That is a bad job on my part. Congratulations on obviously a well-deserved honor as your career continues to be mentioned very fondly.
And I wouldn't, if I had the opportunity to go in, I think this is the best time to go in.
Yeah.
I'm going in with Coach Rick, with my coach, and I'm honored to be a part of this. Everyone knows the history that I didn't get opportunity to win in this game, but I'm just happy that I've been honored. My football career has been on notice recently a lot. And I'm just happy the way my career went, and I'm happy that I'm going in with Coach Rick. No
doubt about that, Terrence. I appreciate your time. Congratulations, and my bad for not bringing that up sooner.
Thank you.
Good stuff, Terrence.
Good one.
Appreciate it. Great stuff from Terrence Edwards there, the terrific former Georgia Bulldog. Well-deserved honor to go into the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame. And as Terrence said, the guy that he gets a chance to go in with is his former coach, Mark Richt. And Coach Richt had some really nice things to say on social media this week about Terrence, and it's fun to be able to roll. We don't do back-to-back guests a lot on our show like that, but fun to be able to roll from one right to the other. The coach that was with Coach Richt, I should say with Terrence for a portion of his Georgia career, that's Mark Richt. We're going to get ready a chance to talk to him, and obviously Coach Richt continues to be a tremendous observer of this Georgia program and one of this program's biggest fans still, but also raising money here for a wonderful cause next week. The DawgNation is so proud to be a part of. So, Coach Richt, welcome into the program. We are certainly glad to have you here today. And we just had a chance to talk to one of your former players that I know that you also mentioned on social media here this week. You're going to the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame this year. Your former wide receiver, Terrence Edwards, is going there as well. How much do relationships like this with former players like Terrence, how much do they still mean to you all these years later?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, it's the reason why I still have the same cell phone number since 2001. When I left Georgia, even when I went to Miami, I got a different phone for the Miami recruits and things of that nature because I didn't want to lose contact with 15 years of relationships. And it's been great. I mean, I get guys that will call me or text me and let me know that they're having a kid or that they're being baptized, or
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? It could be one of many things. And Father's Day is probably my busiest day of the year when it comes to texts
Wow.
from former players. So it means a lot to me.
That's really a nice thing to consider. I'm glad you told us that. Obviously, there's a big event taking place next week. We're going to tell everybody about that here coming up in just a moment, how they can help contribute to a wonderful cause as you raise money for a couple of very important medical research-oriented initiatives here. We're going to talk more about that coming up in a moment. Let me ask you a couple of questions before we get there, though, if you don't mind. You're a very pivotal figure in college football's history here, so you kind of understand the game both long-term and what's happening here right now. When you watch a guy like Brock Bowers, what he's doing for Georgia, and obviously UGA is a team concept. There's a lot of guys making big contributions. Certainly that's been the story of the last two national championship teams. But some of us look at Brock and we see more than just a good player. We see a guy who kind of has the look right now of one of the best to do it at that tight end position. Right. What is your overall thought of just how much he's kind of redefining what it means to be a tight end and the very special career he's putting together at Georgia right now?
Yeah, it's been fun to watch. He's a dynamic guy. Obviously, as a route runner, ball catcher, he also gets a reverse here and there.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that everybody knows the ball's going there eventually, but everybody has a really difficult time to take it away. I mean, some of it is the route concepts that he's running and how he does it. He's obviously a big kid that can really move and has got the ability to out jump people and out physical people. He's a mismatch issue. If you put a smaller, faster guy on him just to stay with him speed wise, he muscles him, and if you put a bigger man on him, he runs away from him. If you double him, then you're making yourself vulnerable to the running game and to other people getting single coverage. So it's a little bit of a nightmare to handle a guy like that.
You were obviously a great play caller for a long time. How much fun for you was that game within the game? You mentioned, we've talked about this ourselves. I'm not a former coach, but I obviously enjoy watching the games on TV, where the defense pretty clearly knows that Bowers is the guy that Georgia wants to get the ball to, and Georgia still wants to get the ball to Bowers, even though the defense is keying on, you would presume, trying to stop that. As a play caller yourself, how much fun was that game within the game for you of how do we still get what we want, even though the defense wants to take that away from us?
Right. Well, there's so many things that go into it. You'll look at, down and distance. Obviously, you'll have calls on first down and second and medium. You'll have calls on third and short, third and medium, third and long. You got red zone calls. So you got all these situations that you have to find ways to get the ball moved. And what you do is you look at the defenses and you find out, what do they like to do in these situations? What are they most likely to do? And so when you find that out, then you start designing things that will get your best players the ball, hopefully. But also, if the quarterback does his job and goes through his progressions, it may end up anywhere, depending on how the defense plays it. But when you call a play and you design it a certain way, and you get the response that you need from your quarterback as far as his decision as to where the ball's going, and then when the guy makes the catch, and obviously it all starts with protection too, but when it all comes together and you score that touchdown or get that 2-point play or whatever it is, it feels great.
Well, speaking of the quarterback, a lot of us have been very impressed with what we've seen from Carson Beck. Big shoes to fill after the career that Stetson Bennett put together, high expectations for Georgia. And it just seems like, to our eyes, Carson's getting more and more comfortable each week. You obviously watch it closer than we do. You have a different level of insight than certainly that I do. Have you seen what it seems like a lot of us are seeing right now, which is a guy in Carson who seems to be almost growing exponentially as the season goes along?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much growth you can have in practice. And you learn a lot of things in practice. You understand the fundamentals of the ball handling and the drop back passing game and the rhythm of the routes and things of that nature. And then you scrimmage and you have a spring game and all those things help. But until you get in those games, it's a whole new world as to how a guy's going to react to what's happening. And so there's a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to playing in those games in front of the 90, 100,000 people and millions on TV. It's just different. And so the more comfortable a guy gets in those situations, the better he can function and do his job. You know, you as a quarterback's coach, you know, you want your guy to focus on his job. Don't focus on the stands. Don't focus on what this play means or this drive means. Just play by play, understand your assignment, make sure you're in the right protection. If they show something that you can't protect, you got to either change the protection or you got to be able to throw hot to somebody. And, you know, so those are the kind of things that the quarterback's got to deal with. And when things go as planned, it's one thing, but if a defense decides we're going to do something different to try to disrupt what they're doing, then all of a sudden you got to react in between series. And if you don't have a lot of experience, it's hard to say. Like, for example, if you got a 2 or 3 year starter and somebody throws something at you you didn't practice, well, you probably saw it somewhere in your career.
Yeah.
And Coach Bowl could say, hey,
yeah,
you know, this is what Auburn did last year, if you remember. Oh, yeah, Coach, I remember. Well, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
But you don't have that to draw from it right away.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Really good stuff from Coach Richt here on DawgNation Daily. And, Coach, if we can, let's move on and talk about the Chick-fil-A Dog Bowl taking place next week. We're going to be able to stream this and show this on our video channel next week. What an incredible thing this is going to be. Folks, the website I want you to keep in mind here is ricksdogbowl.com. It's a great opportunity both to have some fun. If you tune in and watch it on DawgNation next week, you're going to see some bowling skills from some of the Georgia players here on display. But also, most importantly, Coach, raising money for a couple of really important causes, obviously near and dear to your family. You continue to courageously battle Parkinson's disease. We're going to raise some money in support of that research next week, going to the Isaacson Center for Neurological Disease Research there at the University of Georgia, but also Crohn's disease as well, which your granddaughter Jaden is also dealing with here right now there as well. So let's, I guess, first of all, talk about the personal connection to both of these diseases and the desire to see big-time medical breakthrough both with Crohn's and with Parkinson's. You know, talk about that, what it means to your family personally, if you don't mind.
Right. And just before I do that, you mentioned the website, the giving website, ricksdogbowl.com, and it's RICHTS dog, DAWG, bowl, BOWL, like bowling, and .com. So
absolutely,
ricksdogbowl.com. So,
absolutely. And those watching on video can see that right now, and we'll make sure we get that spread out as far as wide as we can.
Okay, thank you. But, you know, because this event is about having a great time and raising money for those two causes, those two diseases. And it just so happens at the University of Georgia, we've got a team that's working very, very hard on the Parkinson's, and there's a connection between the gut, which, you know, has to do with Crohn's,
yep,
and Parkinson's. So we're kind of killing two birds with one stone, and it happens to be the two diseases that our family is most concerned about, because I do have the Parkinson's, as you said, and our granddaughter Jaden has got she's been diagnosed. She's one of the youngest kids ever to be diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Wow. As a little bitty, about 15 months or whatever it was, but you know, by the grace of God, she's doing well at this moment. But you know, what happens with her is if certain medicines don't work after a certain amount of time, sometimes there's nothing to go to next. And so the more research that is done, the better shot we have of keeping her in a good place. So it means so much to us. But you know, Parkinson's it's not fun. You know, it kind of slows your movement down, it slows your body down, and eventually, you know, takes over your body. But you know, the big thing is you know, trying to help Dr. K and his wife do this research, and need money to do it. And so far, everybody's been unbelievably generous. We've got about $650,000 or so raised, and we're shooting for $750. So I hope the Bulldog Nation gets fired up and keeps cranking this thing up and getting us to that goal number, which would be glorious.
I'll finish with this because I want to be respectful of your time. you and I have had a couple of conversations about this, and like the one thing that you've made very clear is when it comes to the Rick's Dog Bowl event, the Chick-fil-A Dog Bowl taking place next week, is that you have a real desire for this to not just raise money for a great cause, but also be kind of a fun experience there as well. Obviously, folks having fun, whether they're tuning in to watch and, you know, being motivated to give because of what they see happening on the screen, or for the folks who are, you know, lucky enough to be there. And obviously, it's a private event for those who are kind of, a part of the donation process here. But you have really expressed the idea that you want this to be a really fun event, and you want to get everybody together that's going to be there, and, you know, kind of have that fun time there together, and do it around bowling, something that a lot of people kind of enjoy doing and can kind of have some fun with. Would you mind just kind of going into more detail about, you know, why the bowling event made sense, and why the idea of just making sure those that are contributing to this also get that kind of fun experience out of it?
Right. Well, you know, a lot of people enjoy bowling, and I think a lot of people use golf as a fundraiser. And the problem with golf is it can rain, number one. And number two, I think as golfers, normally when you go to those fundraisers, it's mostly the men or the dads that are golfing with a celebrity golfer. But with bowling, it's something you could do as a family. Like, I know a lot of the people are just bringing family members to go bowl and have a good time, meeting the Georgia football players that are going to be there, and some of the former players that are going to be there. And, I think that the other thing, too, is, you know, the money that we raised for that particular event has already been pledged and already been given. It's X amount of dollars to sponsor a lane, and then there's some corporate sponsorship. And then the title sponsor, of course, is Chick-fil-A. And the Kathy family's going to be there bowling, you know.
Oh, nice.
And so they're bringing their families. And so it's going to be a fun family affair. And while we're there, we're not trying to raise money with the group that's inside the building, but we are going to turn to the fundraising when it comes to the social media giving and asking the Bulldog Nation to join us.
Well, Coach Rick, I think it's going to be an outstanding event. Obviously, here at DawgNation, we're incredibly proud to be a part of it. And I want to remind folks once again, that website is ricksdogbowl.com. As he said, it's his name with the S at the end, RICHTS. Dog, of course, we know how to spell that. DAWG, ricksdogbowl.com, BOWL. ricksdogbowl.com. You can get involved and help Coach Rick and his family get to that goal of $750,000 going towards research for eventual cure for Parkinson's disease, Crohn's disease there as well. The Isaacson Center for Neurological Disease Research there at UGA doing some incredible work. And obviously it takes big-time funding to get big-time research breakthroughs, and that's what this gives us a chance to do. So, Coach Rick, we appreciate your time here on the show. We certainly appreciate the courageous way that you continue to go through Parkinson's disease here. Obviously, you're an inspiration in terms of how you continue to just inspire us all. We certainly appreciate that, and we here at DawgNation are certainly looking forward to being with you again next week. And
I'll say this: I appreciate DawgNation so much to stream this thing live. It's going to be. It may not be perfect production because there's some things we got to deal with, but in the end, we're going to have a good time, and I hope the fan base enjoys it.
Coach Rick, thank you so much. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Good stuff there from
Rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Good stuff there from Mark Richt. And with that, we'll get ready to go through and do our SEC through. And as Coach Rick said, going to get a chance next week live here on video, streaming with DawgNation, a chance to show you the Chick-fil-A Dog Bowl next week. A lot of Georgia players bowling, a lot of participation there on that. Obviously raising money for a great cause. So I hope you will check out that website, ricksdogbowl.com, to go there and do that. And obviously, Coach Rick has meant a lot to us for a long time, and he continues to mean a lot to us. Great guy to talk some football with, but also a great guy to really talk about, just doing the right things in life, including using the fame that he's been given to raise money for causes that are important to his family, that have impacted both him personally and his family personally. What a tremendous thing that is. So we'll look forward to doing more of that next week. And we'll also look forward to going cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean here right now. And I have to say, to change the subject to something completely different here for a moment, I got some very good news yesterday. I am now confirmed. I'm going to get a chance to be on Icon of the Seas early January, or at least early-ish January. How about in January? Let's say it like that. to get a chance to experience the largest cruise ship that's ever sailed. When it sets sail in January, I am going to be a part of it, and I am so happy about that because, A, I genuinely do want to tell all of you about the experience and kind of describe to you why you and your family need to have your own Royal Caribbean cruise vacation experience. I just think it's a great time to do that here in 2024 with so many new things on the rise. And then also selfishly, I've wanted to experience this for myself because it is going to be different than anything we've ever seen before. And I wanted to kind of figure out exactly how that was going to work and how it's going to look. And, the brand new neighborhood concepts that are introduced here and the fun specialty restaurants and the bar and lounge concepts being introduced. Largest water park at sea. It's kind of a combination of a beach resort and a water park and a theme park. It's all like together in one ship here. And it's an amazing experience, and I can't wait to experience it and then tell you about it. I will do the hard work of kind of exploring this myself and then coming back and reporting back to you on what I see. But if you want to be either on board, just like I'm going to be, or perhaps at some point in time next year, Jessica Slater, great travel agent, can tell you all about that. Call her, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147, or email jslater@dreamvacations.com. That's jslater@dreamvacations.com. She's a great travel agent. She was specially selected for us by Royal Caribbean, and she's got you covered on any of your Royal Caribbean cruise vacation needs. All right, one more point on a topic we've hit a couple of times here this week. Mark Stoops and the whole NIL thing. And after this, we've probably said all we need to say about this. So Stoops yesterday was on the SEC teleconference. Each and every week on Wednesday, every SEC coach basically gets on what's essentially amounts to a Zoom call with a bunch of other reporters, and they all take questions from the assembled media, the august body of journalists who no doubt populate that each and every week. And so Stoops offered his defense for the comments that have kind of gone probably more viral than perhaps you would have expected they would, related to Georgia's so-called buying of players when it comes to the NIL thing here. Now, while I don't love the idea that Stoops, I think, blamed his own fans for the level that Kentucky's at, Stoops says he didn't do that. That's the part of what he says that I can't quite get on board with. There's a little bit of finger pointing from Stoops of, hey, don't blame me. You guys need to give more NIL if you want better players that can compete with the likes of Georgia. To me, that's a little bit of a sidestepping of responsibility, and I find that distasteful, whether Stoops does it or anyone else who's done that. But the thing that Stoops says that admittedly I do have to kind of, admit that he's probably got a good point on. In a roundabout way, what he said is, you can go find the quote. I don't have the quote to show you on the screen, but you can go find it. It's not hard to find if you want to see it. He basically said, listen, this one caller on my call-in show got on my nerves, and so I was basically firing off at him. I'm not firing off at all of our fans. I'm just basically annoyed at this one dude. And to me, that kind of makes sense, right? That's one of those things that just sort of makes sense. There aren't a ton of coaches left. Stoops does this. I think Beamer does this. Saban, believe it or not, still does this, where you take some calls for your coaching show. That's not the kind of thing a lot of people are doing anymore. And, the idea that, if you get a chance to call in and talk to the coach, for a lot of people, that's their shot at the title. Of course, they're going to try to see if they can, the same way that people troll online. Of course, if some people feel like they can stir it up with the coach, that's their chance to, in their mind, speak truth to power. Of course they want to do that. And so if you're Stoops, there is a certain amount of, who is this guy to question me? And so he probably fired off a little edgier response than he should have. It was kind of taken as a retort to all of his fans. Stoops says actually meant for this one guy who was getting on my nerves. He didn't say that, but that's essentially what he meant. And from that standpoint, we sort of understand where Stoops is coming from. And when Stoops says, hey, we're all kind of in the same boat here trying to figure out the NIL stuff, we've said that. The biggest challenge facing programs in the future is how do you fund NIL? Obviously, a lot of fans would love the idea of their program having a robust NIL program, but when it comes to digging deep to contribute the kind of money that allows that to take place, there are people who are just limited in that regard, both in terms of they're not rich, but even rich people, it's not like rich people are just sort of, Scrooge McDuck sleeping on a pile of $100 bills. I mean, that money's allocated to different places there as well. And so you have to, if you want to give big to the NIL fund, you have to liquidate some sort of asset somewhere else. And that's not the kind of thing that rich people typically do very willingly because that's how they stay rich. But the point is that, Stoops is right when he says we're all in the same boat trying to figure all this out. And we certainly give him a little bit of a free pass with the idea that one caller during one portion of a call-in show kind of got on his nerves a little bit. shifting gears to recruiting, Saturday, very rare to have a college football Saturday that includes a big commitment announcement, but we do have one of those on Saturday coming up for defensive lineman Aiden Breland. Breland's got a top 3 here, which includes Georgia, Miami, and Oregon, and he's going to announce, I think it's 2:30 p.m. on Saturday, 2:30 Eastern time there on Saturday, what his ultimate commitment announcement is going to be. First of all, this is a very strange thing to do. You got a big, game day. One of the schools that he's considering, Oregon's playing Washington. It seems like, no matter what Breland says, and there's obviously the point of the topic is there's a lot of chatter connecting Breland to Oregon as of late, and he's announcing on the day that Oregon's playing its biggest game of the season against Washington. Now, if he does choose Oregon, obviously Ducks fans will be excited. They'll give him some love for that. But it seems like making this announcement on a Saturday is sort of a strange thing to do. But ultimately, that's probably bearing the lead. The point is, if you're paying attention to the online chatter, as we like to describe it as, online chatter as of late is definitely connecting Breland to Oregon. Is there time for that to change between now and Saturday? We will perhaps see. But it's pretty substantial from a number of sources here right now on the idea that Breland and Oregon seem to be in pretty good shape. And so you see a little bit more Georgia versus Oregon recruiting stuff as of late. Dan Lanning is pretty clearly establishing himself. Here's make our official picks tomorrow. We think that Oregon has a real shot to win at Washington on Saturday, even though the Huskies are undefeated and getting a lot of national love. We think Oregon's got a real shot to win that game. And Dan Lanning pretty quickly is going from being, hey, young guy that got a shot at a place like Oregon to suddenly being one of the top up-and-coming coaches in college football. On the field proving that. Recruiting wins if they do get this one for Breland. Another way of kind of proving that. And so Lanning versus Kirby may be a thing we see a lot more in the years to come, no matter where Lanning goes to, because if he continues on this trajectory, a big offer to at some point in time be in the SEC, you got to think that's perhaps coming Lanning's way there as well. Then finally, we'll mention this handful of injury situations for Florida moving to that game against South Carolina on Saturday. We're going to keep our eye on this close and try to give you a final update perhaps on that tomorrow for what I think is going to end up being one of the most important games in the SEC here this week. Obviously, Shane Beamer is in the situation on the South Carolina side that a lot of coaches kind of find themselves in. And while admittedly South Carolina thus far this year has not been quite as good as we expect them to be, the one thing that we did acknowledge with the Gamecocks is when you kind of move into a year 3 situation, it's easy to impress in your first year. It's oftentimes easy to then take that next step your second year. Shane Beamer has done that, perhaps even more so than he's gotten credit for. But in year 3, the next step is a doozy to go from, hey, a little bit better than expectations, or, hey, even a little bit better now than we were the year before. But by the time you get to that third step in that progress, now you're talking about a real tangible accomplishment. And in the SEC, that's just not an easy thing to do. And sometimes you have, the idea of we're getting better, but it's not reflected in the record. And that's always kind of a tough, dangerous spot to be. But I believe that's where South Carolina probably is right now. This is a team that's becoming more, I think, entrenched as a program. They're actually doing fairly well in recruiting. But wins thus far this year have been hard to come by. So with that in mind, getting the win against Florida, I'm sure South Carolina views this to be crucial on Saturday. And obviously they want to show out for their home fans and what you would almost certainly assume to be a raucous environment at Williams-Brice Stadium. But ultimately it's actually Billy Napier on the Florida side who needs this win most of all. Napier right now is staring a pretty rough record in the face if they were to lose this game, knowing you've still got an LSU and a Georgia and a Florida State, among others, coming in future weeks. That this is a very important game because the Gators have always kind of been teetering on the brink of bowl eligibility. Last year, made a bowl, got embarrassed against Oregon State in the Las Vegas Bowl, finished the season with a losing record. This year, there's no guarantee Gators even make a bowl, although I expect they probably, at least in some low level, probably will. But games like this are pretty important to sort of maintain any sense of momentum that Florida had with its win against Tennessee. Obviously goes out and drops the game the following week to Kentucky and gave up a massive rushing total to Ray Davis along the way towards doing that. Florida needs this game bad. This is the kind of thing the SEC gives you. People say the SEC's down right now. Perhaps it is. But there's no league that provides the kind of drama for the sort of mid-level games the way the SEC does, with massive stakes it would appear on both sides here. That's just a lot of fun, and I can't wait for it there on Saturday. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, before we wrap up today, I want to give out a shout-out quickly to our friends at Mr. Rooter, because Mr. Rooter offers a lot of things for you right now when it comes to some plumbing issues you may be facing there at your home, whether it's whole home water filtration, drain cleaning repair, water heaters, and so much more. They're dedicated to addressing your plumbing needs as quickly as possibly can be done. Now, that's true for residential. You got commercial stuff. Perhaps you're a landlord. You got some passive income coming from rental property. They can do that for you there as well. They do plumbing stuff all day, every day, and they can provide you upfront pricing, flexible service options, and exceptional customer service. And don't you know, that's important there as well. Plus, the dispatch fee is just $29. So really important reason for you to check out MrRooterGeorgia.com. That's MrRooterGeorgia.com for more on that today. All right, to wrap things up here, how about a golden shoe? I think this is funny. So a lot about the Mark Stoops, the NIL stuff. So Mike Gillespie sent this to me. Mark Stoops standing on the side of the road begging, need better players. Anything helps. God bless. I think that's pretty funny. Mike Gillespie will give you a golden shoe for that here today. Obviously, really funny stuff, kind of making fun of what it's been. Sort of a weirdly hot topic here this week. Everyone's been talking about the Stoops stuff. It's, clearly struck a nerve, even though a lot of people are like, well, I don't know. The tangible facts probably don't necessarily rise to the level of attention that it's gotten, but nonetheless, people have had some fun with it, and Mike Gillespie clearly has some fun there with a well-earned golden shoe for what sort of feels like Stoops kind of begging for money a little bit earlier here this week. How about our Gator Hater Countdown? Lousy, stinking Gators, desperate for a win against South Carolina, but totally hopeless when it comes to Georgia. 16 days from now, that is our Gator Hater Countdown. We'll see all of you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work on time for the price it's promised. They take good care of you. They do all of that. And one more time, speaking of our Gator Hater Countdown, a really heartfelt apology due to Terrence Edwards. To be totally honest with you, we were trying to squeeze a lot into today's show, so I was trying to make a quick transition from Terrence to Coach Rick because we were happy to have Coach Rick on, obviously talk some football, but also to promote a big-time worthy cause that DawgNation's partnering with him on. So in the midst of the transition, I probably did cut it a little shorter with Terrence than I normally would, and I was going to save the Georgia-Florida stuff for next week. So that was kind of the thought process there, but ultimately not giving Terrence the due that he deserves for a really cool honor. Anytime you go into a Hall of Fame, like my goal is just to be like completely obnoxious for a moment. I'd like to be in a Hall of Fame someday. And I'll take any Hall of Fame. I don't know if there's like a podcaster's Hall of Fame or a streaming video Hall of Fame. Maybe one of these days there will be. Perhaps the medium is too young to have something like that. I don't know that I would quite qualify for that, but I'll take anything. I'll take a geographic Hall of Fame. Hey, I think maybe if I buy my way in, like sometimes, people kind of like buy their way, like you donate enough money, they'll put your name on a building in a college. Maybe I can buy my way into a Hall of Fame one day. I'd like to be in a Hall of Fame. I think that'd be great. As it stands right now, I'm not really a candidate for anyone's Hall of Fame, but maybe one of these days I can be. All right, let's go to YouTube here first, and we'll see what's on your mind. Good to see Marie in here today. Having a good time. Appreciate that. Crow King 123 says, I could definitely make the cruising Hall of Fame. I could do that. So there's this thing with that Royal Caribbean has, and if you don't cruise a lot, you don't know about this, and if you don't know about this, you don't care about this. But like if you go on enough cruises, you earn this status where like Royal Caribbean will give you a badge. And the people who earn this, it's called like pinnacle status, I think it was called. That the highest achievement is like pinnacle status. And so if you get pinnacle status, you get a badge. And the people wear the badges on the cruise, and that's their way of saying, "Hey, I'm pinnacle status." So, like for a lot of you that have achieved like certain, elite customer service status, and certain things. Some of you for like airlines, things like that. I've never had any of that kind of thing because I just don't fly enough to get that. When it comes to hotels, I just typically stay whichever one's cheapest. So I'll never have like hotel status. But given my age, I'm young enough. Given my propensity for taking cruises, is there a chance that one day I get pinnacle status on Royal Caribbean and get the badge? Now, if I got the badge, I'm not sure I'd wear it. I'm a little bit, even though I like shout into a microphone for a living, away from the show, I'm actually pretty low key. Like I have, somebody earlier talked about me having a split personality. I really do have a little bit of a split personality about that. Like on the show, I'm blah, 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 loud. I am not that way off the show. So the idea that I would walk around with like a big gold badge that broadcasts my pinnacle status, I probably would not do that, although I certainly understand why others would. It's a great, no pun intended, badge of honor. So I will never achieve elite status for anything else. I just don't do any one thing enough to do it. But Royal Caribbean, before it's all said and done, I think it takes a lot of cruises to get there, but I'd have a shot to do that, I would think. Let's see what else. BA's Ty Stone Cold Style says BA's got his boat wings. It's kind of like the thing you used to give you when the kid flew on the airplane. Marie says, I've only cruised with Royal Caribbean twice, but it was great. Well, Marie, I'm happy to hear that. BA's Cardigan says, are the Braves getting eliminated tonight? I certainly hope that's not the case. You know, here is my like sort of best hope is that, you know, the old cliche about, momentum is only as good as the next day starting pitcher. I really hope that's true, right? Because there is a thing about momentum where even if it's not true, it sort of feels true. And if it feels true, then that's basically the same thing as being true. It just seems like right now, Philadelphia, who was forced to be hot for much of the second half of the season, has just kind of continued in the playoffs in the same run they were on prior to that. Seems like that's kind of the case. But that momentum can be quickly upended, and the entire series can feel different if you just get the big start from Strider today. And he didn't give you that in game one, but I hope that's like the outlier and the thing that, you know, this is the real Spencer today. That's what you hope. And I know he didn't have a great postseason a year ago, but he's also injured. That if Spencer Strider gives you a Strider-like outing, then suddenly the whole series changes because Game 5 comes back to Atlanta, where Atlanta's the house of horrors. And Atlanta, I know that Philadelphia's already won here, but Atlanta, you know, certainly is capable of creating, to the extent that there's a home field advantage in baseball, Atlanta is certainly capable of creating that. So this series has been a total disaster, a total disaster. Now, Game 2 is one of the most thrilling moments of my sporting life, but the sum total of good things the Braves did in that game was a span of about 5 minutes. Everything else was the same blowout the entire rest of the series has been. This series, in terms of counting up all the moments that's happened, ratio of good to bad, the series has been a disaster. But that all can change. The feeling of all of that can change if you get the big outing from Strider today. Well, let's see what else. Matt Presley says the Braves, I should say the Phillies, could not hit the ball any better than they have in this series. They remind me of the World Series Braves. Yeah, I mean, you talk about barreling them up. My gosh. Now, Elder, who gave you 2 really good innings to begin yesterday after the controversial decision to start him, I mean, you can't leave the ball up like that in the third inning. And, you know, he had left a couple of sliders just kind of floating up in the air, you know, belt high and above. You just can't do that. You just can't do that. And absolutely got ripped. Cretaceous Williams asking about Darius Smith. I don't have any details on this other than it's expected that he's not going to play, I believe, again this Saturday, and I do not believe this is injury related. I know Mr. Smith, I mean, we don't have to be like secret about this. We see Mr. Smith in the comment section a good bit. I have not seen him in a few days, so I don't know what the story is here. I don't. Perhaps other people at DawgNation do, reporter-wise, whatever else. I personally do not. So whatever it is, I obviously wish him and his whole family well, because a lot of us have gotten to know Mr. Smith in here because Darius' father, because he comments a lot. So we obviously, you know, wish them well, but I have not personally talked to that family. Like my thing is, I don't know. It's like I'm not really a reporter. I try to leave people alone. You know, I'm sure it's a reporter's job to sort of, you know, figure out what's going on there. And obviously, if there is reporting out there, we'll talk about the reporting. But I'm gonna kind of leave them alone on that. I don't even have any speculation as to what it is. I just don't know. But I understand when the question is being asked. I mean, I do get that, but I don't have the answer. John Henrik says that Charlie Morton being out has not helped. Yeah, I mean, if you're lucky enough to get to an NLCS, you'd like to get him back. Pretty clearly, some injuries to pitchers have not been great. I like this from Tyrants Reynolds, who says we need a signature hand gesture. I know we say go Dogs when passing, but like on the roads and highways, something like Texas has with the horns, what are your thoughts? I love the idea of it. I do. Because, like, you know, the horns, everybody knows it, and it creates the opportunity for horns down, which I don't care. I mean, like last night, I didn't mind. I mean, it makes me mad, but the idea that Philadelphia is mocking Atlanta with like the mock chop, like that's the hand gesture that associated with the Braves. I like the idea that even in victory, the only thing the Phillies can do is a gesture famous for Atlanta. These wannabe New Yorkers have no culture of their own, so therefore they have to kind of borrow Atlanta culture as a way of making fun of it because they don't have anything of their own. So I like the idea of having some sort of gesture that's kind of associated with you. For Georgia, I don't know what it would be because dogs don't have hands. That's the problem. It's like, whatever your hand gesture is, dogs don't have hands. So I don't know. Michael Carvell, the producer, says the number one. Is Georgia going to own number one long enough that that's all you need to know? Hey, the rest of y'all are fighting for second place, but right here is number one. I don't mind that. Last year we had go for 2 and 22, but for go for 3 and 23, I have a hard time holding up 3 fingers. So if you'll notice, our go for 3 and 23 logo this year is not a hand gesture because 3 fingers sort of hard for me to hold up. Some people do 3 like this. It's a little bit hard for me to do. I do 3 more like this, which I don't know. Sort of like the old Shane Douglas triple threat type thing. But so that's the issue with that. We had the hand gesture last year, go for 2 and 22, and I'd be walking around Athens, wherever Georgia's playing, and I get 2 fingers all the time. Hey, people are giving me the 2 fingers all the time for go for 2 and 22. We've kind of adopted slightly different nomenclature for go for 3 and 23, but I like the idea of the hand gesture. I do. Let's see what else. John McAleer says that Georgia fans are horrible at responding to me when I say go dogs. It's downright embarrassing. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Let's see what else. Johnny Surf Dog says, at least we don't do the ridiculous double arm chop. Yeah, that was what Jane Fonda was saying was doing that, right? The double arm chop. Let's see what else. B.A. Scardigan says, I haven't liked the city of Philadelphia since the Falcons had to play them up there in the playoffs, and they were throwing full beer cans at the Falcons fans. Yeah, so I was up there for the NFC Championship game in 2005. First of all, coldest day of my life. It snowed like 9 inches. It was unbelievably cold. I'd never experienced anything like this. And Phillies fans, or I should say the Philadelphia fans, are pretty terrible. Pretty terrible. That is true. B.A. Scardigan says, barking is our hand gesture. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing, is you do have the sort of vocal deal there. And so I'm a big believer. Some of y'all probably saw the video of the day of like the young Georgia fan who got down on all fours and started barking at a South Carolina fan and had to be held back like it was a rabid dog. So there's a meme out there now about Georgia fans barking at other fans. I honestly don't believe that used to be true, but once the meme got established, now it is true, and you do see more barking in the face of other people. This is one of those things where I think the Georgia fans sort of bought into the caricature at a certain point. Nature Gator is right. Florida does have a hand gesture. They got the chomp. And once again, so you can do like the chomp and then the throat slash, and everybody knows what you're doing, which I don't mind. Once again, I have a pretty high tolerance for stuff like this. It's like, if you're going to have horns up, people are going to do horns down. We're not that clever. If you're going to do gator chomp, people are going to do the gator chomp and the slash after that. They're going to do that. I don't mind that. I don't. That's just kind of the way it's going to go sometimes. Let me go to DawgNation.com for a minute. DT says, I say, how about them dogs people all the time, and I get a how about them all the time right back. So it sounds like DT's hanging out with a better class of Georgia fan than our guy was over there. BMAC pointing out that the Texas mascot also does not have hands. That is true. So maybe the idea that dogs don't have hands was not the greatest argument. But let me change it by saying it's fairly easy to do the shape of the longhorn with your hands. Honestly, that's a semi-creative thing, right? But you can't really do, like, unless you're doing like the what do you call it, the shadow animals. You can't really do a dog, right? It's kind of kind of a hard thing to do, to like make the dog like the shadow wall animal or something like that. Now, when I was little, when Georgia beat Texas in the Cotton Bowl, back then it wasn't horns down. I feel like I used to see adults doing the thing where they had like the horns kind of hooked. Instead of like hook 'em horns, it was the horns got hooked. That was kind of the deal. Horns down, I believe, is more of a 21st century phenomenon, I think. Senior Dog 54, very important thing here, that both Miley Cyrus and Eric Church were referenced in regards to the Wrecking Ball, but the great Emmylou Harris had an album by that name back in the day. She has more talent in her pinky toe than either of those two combined. Well, I like Emmylou Harris, but I'm not against Eric Church. I like Eric Church. Admittedly, Miley Cyrus not my cup of tea necessarily, but I like Eric Church now. I do. But I get where you're coming from. Yeah, I mean, I was actually kind of glad to know that Kirby knows a little Eric Church music. It's sort of hard for me to picture Kirby listening to music. It's sort of a hard thing for me to picture. It's sort of hard for me to picture him listening to music, and it's sort of hard for me to picture him like watching a TV show. Not a Braves game or like a sporting event, but like a TV show. Now, we've been told that he has watched a few, but for whatever reason, that's a tough image for me to like get in my mind of him like fast forwarding through the commercials or something like that. I don't know. That just seems like a little bit hard to imagine. B-Mac says, who is your pick Friday for Buford and Mill Creek? Centel went with Buford last night. Don't sleep on the lines of scrimmage for Mill Creek. I actually sort of agree with you on that. Look, I don't want to sidestep the question because you're asking for a direct answer. I want to try to give you one. So if you force me to give a direct answer, I believe I'm going to probably say probably Buford. I think that KJ Bolden is playing at a crazy high level right now. I think that Bolden is doing for Buford what Caleb Downs did for Mill Creek a year ago. I think that's a very fair comparison right now. But I think that even though they're ranked probably, number 2 right now, I think that Mill Creek is by far and away the most underrated team in Georgia high school football, by far and away. Now, I say that knowing that the defending 7A champs, ranked, I believe, number 2 in the 7A classification. But their offensive line, they've changed a bunch of guys. They've had a lot of, they've obviously lost a lot off last year's team. But their offensive line is still just mauling people like they always were. We saw them earlier this year. They absolutely walloped. North Gwinnett, the Corky Kell Classic, and North Gwinnett's a good team. But Mill Creek is good. Robinson, the running back for them, he may be as prolific as anybody in the state is right now. I absolutely believe that Mill Creek can win that football game. If you're going to force me to make a pick, I'd probably make the safer pick and go with Buford just because of the difference maker I think that KJ is right now. But can Buford along the line of scrimmage make things very tough? Can Mill Creek, I should say, along the line of scrimmage make things very tough on Buford? Yes, I do. I think that Mill Creek could win the whole thing. I do. One of the things I've been steadfast in my belief of is that while Buford is rightly the favorite in the eyes of most people, I do not believe that Buford should be considered an overwhelming favorite over Walton, who beat him last year, over Mill Creek, who won the whole thing a year ago, perhaps Colquitt County as well. Admittedly, with Colquitt, I haven't seen them as much or just don't have a chance to follow them as closely because I don't live down in South Georgia. But I think that Colquitt's a real factor here, too. I know some of the teams that Colquitt's already beaten. I've got certainly great respect for them. So while I understand why Buford's considered the favorite, I could absolutely see Mill Creek win on Friday, and I would absolutely give a couple of teams a chance to win the state championship in addition to Buford. Randy Hall says the Caleb Downs having a very good year at Alabama. Yeah, I mean, I think he's a really good player. Interesting that we haven't heard a ton from Justice Haynes yet. That's interesting. Richard D says, what do you think of Bryce Harper, his sort of throat slash gesture and his disdain and insult and saying Acuna doesn't deserve the MVP? Yeah, I don't like Bryce Harper. Now, I've vented a lot in our 1st and 15. Try to keep this as close to Georgia football as we can. But since you opened the door, I'll walk through it here. What I said a little earlier is that in sports, you don't have to have a good reason for not liking somebody. Like the old school idea of the cut of someone's jib. I don't like the cut of Bryce Harper's jib. I don't know if he's a bad guy or not. Seems like he is. Just the vibe I get from him is not very good. And in sports, that's enough. I can choose not to like Bryce Harper, and there's nothing wrong with that. And this idea that Arcia, who seemingly also doesn't like Bryce Harper, the idea that it's some sort of scandal that he was happy that Bryce Harper got doubled up in game 2, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And, Bryce Harper's got extra motivation. Well, he's already a good player. I'm not really quite so sure much the extra motivation necessarily adds to that. But it's okay not to like the team you're playing. Not everybody has to like each other, and not everybody has to pretend they do. Listen, Kirby Smart's way of going about his business clearly works for him. But the idea that you've got to have a, trademark, a lot of respect for, ... everybody, you don't. You don't. Smart, his operational method of success is to profess lots of respect for everybody that Georgia plays. It's kind of a college football thing. It's always been true. But not everybody has to even respect everybody. In real life, you should show respect to human beings that you come in contact with. You should try to be as kind as you possibly can, as long as it depends on you. That when it comes to stuff like that, in real life, there's certain rules. But in sports, the rules are just different. You don't have to respect the Phillies. You can hate them. And you can hate Bryce Harper for reasons that aren't even well-defined. Just something about the cut of his jib just doesn't seem all that great to me. And Arcia being happy that he got doubled off, yeah, it did make that a little bit sweeter knowing that was Harper. There have been a bunch of people saying a bunch of stuff about who should win the MVP. And guess what? A couple of the guys you heard mention, Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman, went one forever against the Diamondbacks and got swept out of the series. Now, we ain't going to talk too much trash about that because the Braves may be about ready to be dismissed in a similar fashion. But, we'll put a pin in that. We may come back to that depending on how this series changes. Hold on, y'all. So, yeah, no, I'm not a fan of Bryce Harper. And there's nothing wrong with the Braves not liking the Phillies. And, frankly, the Phillies don't like the Braves, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Not everybody has to like each other. There's nothing wrong with disliking someone. In sports, anyway. Senior Dog 54 says the Braves hated the Phillies as much as you and I do. The Braves would kill them. I get the frustration there on that. I do. Because I don't like them, and obviously, Senior Dog, you don't either, and a lot of the rest of the folks don't hear there as well. Let's not fully judge the Braves' emotional response as of yet. Let's see what happens today. And if the Braves get kicked around again today for what's basically, 95% of the series and, summarily beaten 3-1 and the only win coming in like improbable, miraculous fashion, then I think anything's fair game. You can criticize the decision to start Elder in Game 2. You can criticize the decision to keep Elder in the game in Game 3. You can criticize the lineup before Game 1. I mean, this is baseball playoffs. People are going to scrutinize every decision. And so if today doesn't go well, it's all fair game, I think. And if you want to say, this was a lifeless Braves team in comparison to the very energized version of Philly that we've gotten, if this game continues like it did, if today's game continues like those games did, that's also fair too. I'm going to hold out hope that Strider, who brings the juice, Spencer brings the juice. I'm going to hold out hope that his presence on the mound, and by the way, the most life the Braves have shown this entire series, with the exception of the Darno home run and the Michael Harris catch, the other spirited moment for the Braves was Strider in the dugout making his case why he wanted to stay on the mound the other day. So if there's anybody who can show you some life, it's Strider today, because he was mad about coming out of the game in Game 1. So maybe that's the little hint that you need, the little clue that he's going to step out there, toe the rubber, take the pill, and give the Braves that emotional shot in the arm that the team desperately needs. Scott Harris says, I've been away in the mountains for 6 days, beautiful views, no self-service, can't think of a better vacay. I do like that, Scott. Now, I'm sorry that you missed our show. I'm glad to have you back here today. But there is something to be said for totally unplugging. There really is. There is a lot of value in just completely getting away. I totally agree with that. A lot of value in doing that. All right, I'm going to get some Facebook comments here. We're going to wrap up in like the next 5 or 10 minutes. After a little shorter comments yesterday, we're going to wrap it up here today. Scotty Barnes says he loves the mountains. I do as well. Like I'm definitely more of a beach person, by just personality-wise. But I need a little bit of mountain time in my life there as well. Sandy Price says it's about time Brock is getting the national attention that he certainly deserves. His overall body of work over the past 2 years and the clinic he's putting on this year speaks for itself. Yeah, it's nice to see him getting that attention. It feels like that's coming his way. David Wayne Carroll calling for a 15 strikeout, one-hitter performance for Strider today. Boy, that'd be something. That'd be something. Really good stuff. Philip Jordan Wells said you could do like the 3 and 23 that way. That's not bad. Didn't like Jimmy Snuka used to do something like that? That's kind of before my time, but maybe David Hoke says, if we make it to Game 5, when we make it to Game 5, it'd be sweet for Harper to sit into a double play started by RC to end the game. Yeah, I mean, so obviously the most fun and entertaining moment of the regular season may have been when Pete Alonso hit the home run and came in the dugout like a total idiot and shouting, "Throw it again," or whatever it was. I think it's "throw it again." And everything for the Braves and the Mets changed right there on that. Mets were never good again. Braves marched right on to another division title. I really, 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 really want to do to Harper what the Braves did to Alonso. That's a little different kettle of fish here right now, just given the way the Phillies are playing. But I really, really would like to do that. Would really like to do that. Let's see what else. Scotty Barnes said, and Neil Calvino talking about liking the beaches and the mountains. Both can be good for peace of mind. Yeah, you probably need a little bit of both in your life. I think that's probably right. If I could only choose one, I'm going to choose beach. You're probably not surprised to hear that. But having both in my life is probably a very good thing. Joel Moody says, once again, I don't know if I'm dexterous enough to do this. He said you could form your hand like a G so that other people could see it. Can you do that? Is it like a G? I guess you have to do it like this. That's not a bad idea. I may not be quite smart enough for that. Like the thing in preschool where like you learn how to do like your fingers and like, dexterity. I don't know that I quite got that. Lynn Shipman having some fun with Mark Stoops. Let's see what else. Johnny Prescott says, early start in Nashville Saturday. I'd recommend a pit stop at the Marriott Bar next to the stadium. Players Gate is close by, and you can grab that early morning mimosa or screwdriver. Johnny Prescott, thinking like a champion in here. Strong stuff there from you, Johnny. I like that. I'm curious to see how much the dog walk, which sometimes in Nashville is actually pretty big because a lot of Georgia fans go to the game. I'm curious to see how different it all is because of the just disastrous stadium construction project. I mean, this is why everybody hates Vanderbilt. It's because they can't do anything right. And the stadium construction project, the latest example of that. So for those of you who are sort of used to dog walk being the same every time Georgia goes to Vandy, perhaps it still is, but be on guard for that being a little bit different. I am curious to see if that ends up being the case. Bill Sanders says Ousmane Cromah from Lee County is the best running back in the state. I would say that Robinson Mill Creek's pretty good. Now, we saw Cromah the other day. He was dominant against Houston County. Dominant running back performance. Other guy that's really good is the North Cobb running back on his way to Clemson. He's had a really good year. Really good year for North Cobb. All right, last comments. We're going to get ready to go. Cassie Turner says the only thing Vandy can do right is baseball, to be honest. That's true. So, like, Vanderbilt, it's kind of funny. They've got the longest string in the entire country of top 20 recruiting classes in baseball. It's like darn near 20 years, something like that. It's like, what everybody else does in other sports, like Vanderbilt is like a top baseball recruiting class every year. They've built quite a program there. Cousin Eddie wants no hand gestures. I think a hand gesture could be a good idea. I don't believe I've got a good idea for a hand gesture. That's the issue there. Star Wars Dog says he's never heard my bark. I don't know that I have a good bark. As I said before, like I'm a loudmouth in the show, but I'm pretty understated off the air, I guess, a little bit. A little bit understated off the air. Cassie Turner says Bryce Harper feels like the little brother that wants the attention, so he whines a lot. As I said before, goober energy. That's pretty good, Cassie. That's pretty good. Crow King 123 says if you keep Vanderbilt for baseball, why do you keep Missouri? They're not dominant in anything. The only reason that Missouri's in the SEC is two reasons. Because back in a day and age in which like cable television was a very big deal, St. Louis and Kansas City came with Missouri in terms of like TV networks and SEC network, overall penetration. So that was Missouri's value, was they brought two decent-sized Midwestern cities into the SEC fold, and they've been here because of that. Marie wondering, he says, well, does that mean then if Vanderbilt's good in baseball, there are more smart people in college baseball than football? I don't know. I have seen some stuff in college baseball that would make you wonder how true that perhaps is, but possibly. Let's see what else. Cassie Turner says Missouri's argument should now be, well, Oklahoma and Texas are coming, so now I can stay. Yeah, I mean, I think that Missouri, like, there are a lot of teams that did not want to play, like, 9-game conference schedule, and most of the teams that didn't want to were kind of the bad teams. But my understanding is Missouri wanted to play the 9-game conference schedule. And for the reasons that Cassie mentioned, Missouri wants to play Oklahoma every year because Missouri was an Oklahoma rival, so to speak, in the old Big 8, which became the Big 12. So a lot of the teams that we typically think of as not being very good, none of them wanted 9-game conference slate because they want to play 4 non-conference games and try to rack up some easy wins. But Missouri, my understanding is they wanted to play the 9-game slate for the very reason that Cassie just mentioned. They want to renew that history with Oklahoma on a regular basis, also playing their geographic rival Arkansas. And they want to have that opportunity to kind of, I guess, rotate Texas more frequently too because of a little bit of shared history there. Missouri recruits the state of Texas, obviously, you should imagine. A pretty good bit. So Missouri did want the 9-game slate, I understand anyway, for the very reasons that Cassie just mentioned. All right, quickly on DawgNation.com, one more time back on Facebook, and we got to go. Over here. Scott Harris says Missouri in the East was one of the worst decisions that ever made by the SEC. So here's the weird irony. Is last year was the first time I'd ever gone to Columbia the entire time they were in the SEC East. It was great. And it was one of those things like, hey, if I had a chance to come back here, I'd definitely want to. And now we don't know when the next time Georgia's going to Columbia is. It's kind of funny. Greg Baker says, beach or mountains. That's why I live here in Nicaragua between football seasons. Greg, that's really cool. And that's a very fun thing. We have a very worldly audience. We got folks checking in from Kenya and Nicaragua. That's pretty good stuff. DT says, I was taught a very ferocious dog bark as a freshman in Russell Hall. I have scared Rottweilers with it. DT, that's really funny to hear. That's really funny to hear. South GA Dog says, as for Harper running himself into a double play to end the game, it could not happen to a better jerk. Yeah, I mean, like, he shouldn't have done that. I mean, that was a very bad base running blunder. The idea that the Braves were wrong for being happy about it, he shouldn't have done it. If you go, almost to second base and basically just stop and let it drop or let it go off the wall or let it go over I realize he's trying to score a run, tie the game. He's trying to be aggressive. But the point is, he's a good athlete. The idea that he needed to be almost to third to score on a ball that drops at the warning track, if it drops at all, that's just not true. That if he goes almost to second, parks, waits for it to drop, he can easily score even with Michael Harris potentially getting a chance to make a throw on it. He could still score from that spot. And he gives himself a chance to get back if the ball is caught. It was just over-aggressive. I get why he's being aggressive. Obviously, you are dying to score from first and tie that game. But he was more aggressive than he needed to be. He didn't have to go that far to score if the ball dropped. He just didn't. If the ball hits the wall and he's at second base, he's scoring easily. He just is. Now, there may have been a play at the plate, but he's still going to score in that spot. DT says he enjoyed it when Dansby Swanson grounded into Arcia to wrap up the sweep in the Cubs season. Yeah, we said before, generally speaking, I kind of like Dansby. By the way, speaking of Vanderbilt baseball, generally speaking, I kind of like Dansby, but I didn't love a lot of the stuff that Dansby did when he first got to Chicago. I don't like try-hard stuff, and I thought that Dansby was trying a little too hard to try to win over Cubs fans to begin his career, and I thought that came at the expense of Braves fans. And I think the Braves fans are wrong for having a little bit of a memory of that. DT says that Harper wanted to be the hero. That's why he rounded second. Perhaps that's true. But it was a bad play. And the idea that the Braves are, some sort of scandal because they celebrated a bad play, I think that's crazy. Rhodey Williams likes the idea of Brock and Mekhi Muse in some sort of trick play. Well, a lot of us have said it'd be nice to see Brock Bowers throw a touchdown this year, like a true Heisman moment. Maybe he throws it to Mekhi Muse. That wouldn't be too bad. I like that. Miriam Corbin does not like the throat slash gesture, so there you go there on that. Peace sign with the thumb. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I feel like that's kind of a cool look right there. Has that been taken by somebody before? That's kind of a cool look. I kind of like that. Now, there's probably a lot of people, if you do that, like, why aren't you just doing the normal 3? But that kind of looks kind of cool. I don't mind that. Joel Moody and Daniel Irvin Wells talking about the fact that Phillies fans yesterday were asking for Spencer Strider, basically like the We Want Strider chant or whatever. Well, today they get him, and all our hopes are pinned on Spencer to change this series. Desperately needing it. Desperately needing it. Nature Gator says if you give it, you need to be able to take it back. And that is true. That's true about Braves-Phillies rivalry, or about Georgia-Florida rivalry, about whatever else. I just have a pretty high tolerance for rivalry-style behavior. I do. Now, in real life, I got to try to be kind to everybody, right? I don't go around like picking fights with people in real life. But like good-natured ribbing back and forth among sports fans, or teams competing at the highest level, perhaps taking it a little bit personally when someone's trying to take food off their table, I have a pretty high tolerance for stuff like that. That just makes sense to me. So I think that nature's right about that. If you do it, give it back, and everybody moves on with their life. And if Harper wants to use this as additional motivation, he's got every right to. Now, the idea that he hit a home run because he's mad, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You know how hard it is to home run? The idea that now I'm mad, I'm going to go out and do it, that's crazy. But he gets to choose how he wants to behave, and he's using this as motivation right now, which you'd like to think, okay, well, now the Braves have, the motivational, ball in their court to be fired up by what, Harper did, right? It's like, I'm just sort of fine with it all. Just come play better. Just play better. But yeah, I kind of agree. But yeah, if Harper wants to use this, he's got the right to try to do that. That's fine. And I don't agree with, I guess through a translator, and sometimes you wonder how accurate some of this stuff is, but I guess through a translator, Arcia has now said that the sanctity of the clubhouse was violated or something like that. I don't know if Arcia said that, if somebody else said that on his behalf or what. I don't want to hear that. Just own it. It's fine. You don't like Harper. You're glad he got doubled off. You should be happy that he got doubled off. That's how you won the game. Now, go out there and be as edgy as they were. I don't want to hear sanctity of the clubhouse. I don't want to hear that. And I don't care about the whole media thing. I don't care about any of that. Just play better. The sanctity of the clubhouse wasn't violated. Your teeth kicked in. That's what really happened. So please just play better. 225 girl says it just goes to show that are just playoffs just a different animal. Yeah, it is totally different. I mean, it's a 162 game regular season, and the entire livelihood of the entire year comes down to 5 games. That is just a very different brand of baseball, but it's why it's so much fun. I mean, playoff baseball. Whether the Braves benefited from this in 2021, they may be on the wrong end of this here in 2023. It's clearly not the best way to determine the best team, but it's the most fun thing in the world. I mean, it just is. You can't take your eye off any pitch. You just can't. So it's a weird way to decide a season that's kind of based on a long haul. It's a weird way to do that. But it's so much fun. It's so entertaining. It really is. All right, we got to go. Good stuff. Thanks for being here. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. We got RS Andrews Go With The Flow coming up on Friday. I'm back on that show again this week. We had a fun time picking some really good games, and there was some dispute and debate about which games we should pick, which I do get. It's a pretty deep week in terms of at least fun here in the SEC, if nothing else. So we'll give that to you on Friday and remind you to check out RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com. Have a great day. Back here tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then.